egotistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network here for another edition of SNL Stories. So happy to be with you today for a very special interview with a guy who has been very involved in the Saturday Night Live community for years and wrote a wonderful book that we're going to talk all about. So I'm excited to break that all down with you in just a moment. But first, got to introduce James P. Stevens Jr. James, how are you?
Hey, I am doing great. I'm so excited that we get to talk to Mike Streeter today.
There you go. Yes. Very pumped to get to talk to Mike. Happy to have you on with us, James. And of course, it is the man from SNL In Review, Entertainment Weekly's own Andy Hoglund. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, John, quite well. I'm happy and humbled to be here and be able to contribute to this, stimulating conversation with Mr. Mike Streeter. And more importantly, I'm here to support James.
Oh yeah, well, aren't we all? So happy.
I just want to make my priorities clear as we get started.
I'm thankful for that.
Andy, I love my brother.
Yeah, very pumped to have you on, Andy. And then, of course, without further ado, our guest we have on SNL Stories today is a very special one. Sometimes we have former cast members of the crew, but this time we're going to have somebody who wrote a book. And if you're a big fan of SNL books and a collector of them, you will know of this book called Nothing Lost Forever, The Films of Tom Schiller, originally published in 2005 by my man, Mike Streeter. So, Mike, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's not, it's so many years ago that I don't often get the opportunity to talk about this. So very glad to be here. Thanks.
Very excited to have you on. And Mike, I believe that the reason that we are talking to you today is because the book is now out in hardcover, correct?
Yeah, there is it's the exact same book. There's nothing new about it. It just has a nice new hardcover. If you like nice
Excellent.
Books on your shelf, check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So definitely encourage you to go check that out. And we'll do some plugs at the end of the show for where to find that book. But if you're not familiar with the works of Tom Schiller, where have you been? Because Tom Schiller is such an integral part of SNL, especially in terms of pre-tapes. Saturday Night Live, when they were figuring out the beginnings of the show, they didn't necessarily know what the show was going to be. It felt like a variety show in certain senses. Some episodes were more music. But, really, when it was the Schiller pre-tapes were something that I think really established themselves in two different eras of the show, the original cast, and oftentimes you'll remember pre-tapes like Don't Look Back in Anger and La Dolce Gilda, those really famous ones. And then, of course, Love is a Dream from the Phil Hartman and Jan Hooks era of the show. These are famous Tom Schiller films that have permeated the culture of Saturday Night Live for decades. So, Mike, when you were originally writing this book, what inspired you to want to talk to Tom Schiller and get involved in the process of writing about these famous films?
I was just obsessed with his movie, Nothing Lasts Forever. But, I didn't grow up watching Saturday Night Live. I grew up in Holland, and we didn't have SNL there, but we did have all the movies from SNL stars. So, Eddie Murphy, Chevy Chase, those guys were all huge. So I grew up watching those movies, and that's how I saw Nothing Lasts Forever. And then moving to the States as a teenager, I'd heard about SNL. I'd seen it like on vacation. I was really into it. But it wasn't until I moved to the States as a teenager that I was able to actually watch older episodes and watch new ones too. And it took a while, but I made the connection. Oh, this weird movie I saw in the middle of the night years ago was from this guy who did short films on SNL, and they're very similar. So I just I fell in love with his short films. I thought the style was really unique, and that sort of started it.
James?
Yeah, Mike. It's been about 20 years or something where we first met, right?
Yeah, we met at Standby a bunch of times. I'm trying to think. The first show I ever did Standby for, I was living in St. Louis at the time and drove out. Me and my mom drove. I think I was in my early 20s or 20 or something like that. And it was Sarah Michelle Gellar and Faith Hill. I don't know. Was that a show you did?
So
Must have
not
been
that
after
one.
that.
Tell me another. Tell me another one.
Oh gosh, Ray Liotta, the Donnas. I think that was the second one I did. I used to have all that stuff memorized, but with age. But we did a bunch of shows together. Yeah.
And ladies, like we were talking right before the show about this is at a time where like digital copies of things and the internet was not, the way it was. And you were talking about this book that you were trying to put together in Tom Schiller films. And I don't know, do you remember like which ones were the hardest to find or come by or whatever? And I know that I had them and hooked you up, and it was that's how we met, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think I got some from you. I think I got some from Mark
Jennings.
Mark Jennings, yeah.
Marcus Jennings, yeah.
And you guys had pretty much everything. I was amazed. So I had everything from the original era. So Schiller was at SNL 75 to 80, those first 5 years. He didn't start doing short films until I think 77. The first few years was Albert Brooks, obviously, and then Gary Weiss, and finally Lorne let him do his films, which was part of the deal all along. And those were released in on a videotape. I wish I had it here. I have it in storage, but they actually released a videotape. The
classic films, yeah, right, of
Schiller's
Tom Schiller
films. Yeah, they and it had 2 shorts that were never that had never aired as well. So those were the original 75 to 80, and there was one that kind of straggled that showed it in 81. And I think it was only those because Tom owned the rights to those original shorts outright. So Star Maker was able to do it, make a deal with him directly. And his later shorts, when he came back to the show in, I think, 88, he was there 88 to 95, those shorts, he owned 50%. So they never put those out. So I was able to get all of the original shorts, and then the later ones, I had to dig around for them. Eventually, Tom gave me a tape that had some shorts that never aired. He gave me those, and the rest I had to piece together from other fans. Yeah, you, Mark.
It's wild.
Yeah, real detective work, and for younger fans, this is a glimpse into a world that really doesn't exist anymore. It's almost like hard to fathom for someone like myself, and I'm in my mid to late 30s almost. So I'm feeling kind of nostalgic hearing you guys go back and forth on what it used to be like to be a real diehard fan. And Mike, that kind of leads me to my question. First, again, just to kind of set the table a little bit for people listening and watching. You think about the pantheon of SNL books. If you want to view this stuff critically or approach it academically or thoughtfully or what have you, there's not a big universe of must reads in my opinion. I'd put like the Mr. Mike biography on there, and really your book, Mike. So if folks haven't read it and want to be a self-appointed SNL historian like me and James here, you have to check it out. So I guess my question for this conversation is, you were talking a little bit about your origin story, Mike, but how does it escalate? It's one thing to know about Nothing Lasts Forever and to be mindful that Tom Schiller exists. It's another to like his stuff. But what kind of takes you to that third tier and makes you decide this is something that I want to invest so much time and research in and actually turn it into a book?
Yeah, so what happened was I struck up a correspondence with Tom, I guess, probably like 20 years ago. I think like 2002. And I was studying film studies at the time. And I knew that I had to do, kind of like a final project there, like not quite a thesis.
What school was this at?
This was at Webster University in St. Louis. And so I thought about, I'd been talking to him, and he had sent me a copy of the movie after I kind of, politely, I nudged him kind of politely, like, wow, wouldn't it be nice to see that again. I got to see it in the middle of the night because it aired on Dutch TV for some reason. And he was kind of amused by that, sort of that history. So he sent me a tape, and I just fell in love with the movie all over again, finally getting to see it. And I thought, why don't I write my thesis project about Schiller? It's a very interesting body of work. It's sort of short, like there's a bunch of short films, a movie, and then more short films. But I thought, this is, I think the work deserved it. So I wrote it, and I wrote the thesis, and I got a lot of. I remember the head of the department at my school said it was by far the best like final project he'd ever read. And what also helped was for that project I got to interview Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and I think Lorne Michaels as well. Tom had put me in touch with them. And so after that after I finished school, I'm like, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I hung out in Holland for a bit. I went back there, and I tried, maybe condensing it to like an article, and I had no luck with that. And then I thought, why not do a book? And thankfully there was a publisher that was willing to. I guess he kind of just saw the passion. I think at that point it was just a 2-person operation, but Bear Manor Media, Ben Omart, was like, "Here's a bit of money. Go write it." It wasn't much, but my parents were supporting me at the time, and I spent about 8, 9, 10 months writing it, doing more interviews, more research, and it ended up being a book. That's kind of how that happened.
So, Mike, you mentioned the interviews that you did throughout the process of creating this book. And I think that's what our listeners are, very, very interested in, because I encourage them to go and read the book. But it's not just about the interviews, it's the process of conducting the interviews that I think is really fascinating. So you sent me a list of interviews that you did for this book, including Lorne, Dan Aykroyd, Peter Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Mike Myers, Victoria Jackson, Bertie Brillstein. So those are some big names that you hit on there. Are there 1 or 2 stories or people that you want to particularly talk about here that you think the listeners would find interesting, your experience interviewing them?
Yeah. So what happened was Tom gave me Bill Murray's 800 number, and he left a message for Bill as well. And he was basically the first person to call me back, believe it or not. And I spoke to him for a bit, and he was really nice. He oddly knew about the school I went to. He knew a lot about St. Louis, and he, after just interviewing him, suddenly other people were like, "Sure, I'll talk to you." I was able to start. Oh, I already talked to Bill Murray. Can I talk to you? And that made it a lot easier. Dan Aykroyd, the same thing. I don't know if Bill, having interviewed Bill already had anything to do with that, but that was just, it's just Tom putting in the request and then giving me the info and going from there. With Lorne, Tom pushed him a bit because I think Tom wanted to know about what happened with Nothing Lasts Forever. There were some unresolved issues there, and I think Tom kind of wanted to know what was going on, or that's what I always speculated. Maybe he saw this as a good way to have an independent researcher going in and trying to untangle that. And so Tom had to call Lorne a few times, and I was able to talk to Lorne. And then when it became a book, I was able to talk to Lorne a bit more. A few people I talked to after that, I was able to do Mike Myers just through his agents. That went pretty easy. Victoria Jackson, I don't even remember how I got in touch with her. And then Chevy, I think, just through his agents, and he was great. he was that was probably my favorite interview. He was just hilarious, and he dropped all kinds of off the record remarks. There one thing, I guess I guess Chevy's old enough, I can probably tell this. But Tom, one of the sketches that Tom is known for writing is Samurai Hotelier, the very first samurai sketch with John Belushi. And, there's a whole story about how that sketch came to be. It was, they went out for, or I guess I'm getting Nick the Lounge Singer mixed up, but on Samurai Hotel, there was a whole story about who wrote it. And then I think Alan Zweibel took over after the first one, and it became a recurring thing. But it was like a known thing that Tom was the first samurai sketch writer, and I think he came up with the name. I don't know if that's true, but I discussed it with Chevy, and he said, I have to paraphrase, but he basically said, "No, that was me. I wrote that. Tom didn't write that, but go ahead and give it to him. He can have it." And then he started telling me about how other things he would write would go out and come back with other people's names on it. And he made a comment about particularly the female writers. He would write something, the female writers would basically type it out according to him, and it would come back with their names on it. I don't know if that's ever been discussed, but I thought that was I thought that was hilarious. I didn't write about it, but enough time has passed. I can probably share that. And eventually I got to meet Alan Zweibel, and I asked him, like, is it true what Chevy said, what Chevy told me? And he said, no, it was Tom who wrote it, and then I took it over. Basically what's always been written about that sketch.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really fascinating. And you did send me some pictures, by the way. So while I have an opportunity to show some, I figured I could bring them up on screen if you're watching us on YouTube. But there's some really fun ones you sent. Here's a nice one of you. Yeah. I assume is that a party, is it?
That is, so Tom Davis, who wrote the foreword to my book, he and I became really close in the years after I wrote my book. And as he was writing and preparing for the release of his, I got to know him when he got sick. I was only one of the few people that he told about it. And then after he got sick, a lot of people started calling him, and I was like, he didn't need this fawning kid, listening to all his stories. He's got enough people to talk to. So I didn't talk to him that much after that. I talked to him a bunch of times up until his death, and I was at the memorial for him. But this photo's from when the book came out, when the Tom Davis book came out, and I think that was 2005. It is. I have it up here. It's 39 years of short-term memory loss.
Great book. Great book.
Yeah, great book. Although he didn't like that some people challenged him on the facts. He was kind of bummed out by that people were like, "Oh, you got this info wrong." But they had a book release party for that, which I helped him organize with Mark Malkoff, who's the other guy in that photo. And as we were like having dinner, like kind of brainstorming, oh, what are we going to do? And his girlfriend of many years, Lindsay Bryce, who I think took that picture right there, she was also involved in those discussions. And he said, I want an ice sculpture of Lorne Michaels. And me and Mark, we looked at each other and we're like, that's not going to happen. And, we said, sure. We'll look into it. But sure enough, I guess his girlfriend, Lindsay, I think, had an ice sculpture of Lorne made, and it was there. And then Lorne showed up. I guess this was the week that Jimmy Fallon, I think, was doing his first shows. he came with Seth Meyers to the party, and he loved it. He took out his phone. He was just fascinated that there was an ice sculpture of him. You can't really see it well here, but that's the ice sculpture in the middle. So that was another just crazy experience with Tom Davis, who I really miss. He was such a great guy, just an amazing person. I'm very lucky to have had in my life for a few years.
Mike, this is fascinating to hear you talk about it. And just quickly, again, for those that can see it here, I'm plugging the book. I'm a proud owner of the book. I've had it since I think maybe you sent me a copy. Here, can I brag about one thing here?
Sure.
Andy, take a look at this. This is one of the reasons why this book is on my shelf proudly there. If you look at the acknowledgments here, there's a lot of people that helped Mike put this together, but how cool is it to have James Stevens right there after Robert Smigel on the same page where Lorne is being thanked.
I need to pull out my book now to make sure that James's name is in that one.
Yeah, can you check that one for us, Andy? Yeah.
Not just a special doctored copy.
Right. But so about the film, people, I'm encouraging you, if you don't have the book, to read it. Without giving away any spoilers, I mean, what can you tell us that you did learn about its unfortunate being the best kept secret, kind of like no one has seen it? There was a recent interview that Tom Schiller did where he was like laughing that somebody had actually seen the film. Mike?
Yeah, so so the movie, I mean, I can give you some background on the movie. When Lorne left SNL, he wanted to make movies. And so he had a deal, according to him, first with Warner Brothers. And I don't know if Gilda Live was a part of that, but nothing other than that, maybe nothing ever came of that. And then he had a big movie deal with MGM. And this is around the time. This is, I guess, shortly after MGM just, imploded, collapsed. And so as a result of that, other than Nothing Lasts Forever, nothing actually got made. But there were a number of projects he had in development. Al Franken and Tom Davis they wrote a script called 1985, and it was going to be a big sci-fi comedy spoof of 1984. I go into one of the things about the book is there is a lot of minutia in it. I like little details. It doesn't always make for the best reading, but there is just a lot of kind of information that you don't really find anywhere else. I go in depth on 1985. I figured, who else is going to write about this? Let me just do a whole chapter on it. So you can read all about that movie and Tom Davis's and Al Franken's experience in not getting that made. That was going to be a big budget thing. Don Novello had a script that he was working on. I think it was called like A Man Named Sporcaccioni or something like that. I never got any info on that. If I'd have written this book today, I would have maybe tried to interview Don, but it was it was a very different time back then. It was harder to connect to people. And then one of the other interesting things is Lorne and I think John Head at Broadway Video, they were writing I think it was like a Jane Austen adaptation, one of his favorite books, that would have been basically just I think it was Pride and Prejudice, or maybe it was one of those other books. But so they had a bunch of projects, but Tom, and then also Tom, Lorne said, go write whatever you want, something that's really true to your sensibilities. And so Tom, I think Tom was the first one to complete his script, It was just something that didn't look very expensive to make. So when it came time to actually put something into production, they were able to go with Nothing Lasts Forever, which was, it's kind of a cheap thing they could do pretty quickly and get some SNL stars in it. John Belushi was supposed to be in it. That's one of the things I'm proud of with the book, or at least I was back then, was that, that was information that was never shared anywhere. It's not in Wired. It's not in any of the Belushi books, but there's a lot written about how Joy of Sex was going to be his next movie, but actually Nothing Lasts Forever was going to be it. He was going to play a pretty decent size role in it as a homeless person that the main character encounters. But he passed away shortly before production started, and so they went in a completely different direction. They went with a trained British, like, Shakespearean actor, but it still had Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, and it was cheap, so it got made. And then at MGM, the shit really hit the fan around the time it was completed, and it was shelved. It was weird. It was a weird movie. They didn't really know what to do with it. They didn't want to spend money finishing it. It's a movie that actually never locked picture, and they didn't want to spend any money releasing it. So it got a release in 2, maybe 3 theaters. I think one of them, it played in Seattle, and then it played I think it was in Phoenix, maybe. And it was kind of like a test release / obligatory, contract thing. And that was it. And because of the music issues, it never went to TV. It never went to cable. Never went to videotape. And somehow it was part of a package of films that played in other countries. I got to see it in Holland in the very early 90s. And I know it's played in Germany. I think in Italy. I actually helped track down versions of the movie in those languages for Tom. So it played in a few countries outside the U.S., but never in the U.S. until a couple of years ago.
Mike, I was wondering, we live in an era where SNL alumni, they're increasingly putting out memoirs, frequently very self-serving memoirs, and at the same time, it feels like a lot of critics they kind of view the show acritically, right? Like it's either they kind of write about it as an extension of the show's PR apparatus, or they dismiss the merits of the show culturally or creatively. Why is it important to take a filmmaker, an SNL writer like Tom Schiller seriously? Like, what does Tom Schiller kind of mean in your view?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that was kind of why I wanted to write the book. To kind of, I saw something on the show. I mean, obviously, there's great comedy and all these, just culturally relevant, recurring characters that have been on the show over the years. But I saw Tom's films as kind of standing out. I thought they, in many cases, I mean, sometimes it was just played for comedy, but in many cases, it was kind of his short films offered a moment where the show got to be sincere. Like Don't Look Back in Anger, Love is a Dream, the Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks short, and there were a few others. And I thought, okay, let's look at this as, beyond just a comedy show. There were a few things it tried to do, mostly from Tom Schiller, where it tried to be, tried to kind of take it seriously. And I always felt that helped make for a really great mix on the show. And I kind of I kind of felt like they didn't do that enough. It happens every once in a while where you can kind of see a moment where it's just going not just for the laugh, but for, just kind of a heartfelt moment. And I think that's really unique when that happens. And so, so that was one of the reasons I wanted to I don't want to say elevate Tom Schiller, but just kind of look at him from a different angle rather than just, the short films from a comedy show.
Through your experience with all of the interviews and creating the book, you had mentioned prior to the interview that you had also gotten the experience to hang out at Saturday Night Live during an episode. I believe you mentioned it was Ben Affleck and Nelly. I think that was 2004, season 30. What was that like? Did you learn anything cool about the process of SNL and being there wherever you were watching the show?
Yeah, so what happened was I still lived in St. Louis at the time, and I came out to New York to I guess interview some people, and I met with Tom Davis. I'd never met him at that time. My friend Chris and we drove out and we had dinner with Tom, and Tom made us pay for dinner, which I guess makes sense. But for me and Chris, it was kind of tough because we were like dirt poor. And we were at a pretty nice restaurant, and it was like, oh man, this is kind of rough. So at the end, me and Chris were like, screw it. We paid for his dinner. Let's ask him if he can help us get on the show. So I did. And Tom pulled some strings. He got a ticket through, what's his name? Steve, the announcer for Fallon.
Steve Higgins.
Steve Higgins. Through Steve Higgins, he got me and Chris tickets while we were there. That happened to be the show. T-Shawn Shannon was there and kind of hung out with us, showed us around, gave us a tour, and they stuck us in the writer's room the entire time. And so for both the dress rehearsal and the live show, we hung out in the writer's room, and it was really cool chatting with the writers. JB Smoove was there. I remember overhearing who some of the upcoming hosts were. They mentioned Mark Wahlberg, and then that never happened. That was interesting. And it was just really cool. And Doug Abels was another guy we chatted with for a bit, and he got me into the season finale party, I guess that year or the next. And it was cool, and we just kind of hung around there. And then in between shows, all the cast, they gather around there. It's not that big of a room, but they sort of huddled there. And I remember me and my friend Chris were standing there, and Will Forte was rehearsing a George W. Bush, I guess, cold open, and he was just circling us. I don't know if he was annoyed that we were there, or that's just what he did to be in the zone and prepare. But that was very interesting. He just kept going around, spinning around us over and over. And then that was pretty much it. It was really it was cool that we got to experience it from that point of view.
Awesome. James?
That's really, really cool. I wanted to say another thing about the book. Again, love the book, and there's what you wrote about. You do talk about these going into tangents and digging deep, where it might be the only time someone is really talking about a specific thing. But in addition to that, wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the other goodies that are in there. Like there's like an expense voucher from La Dolce Gilda that was from Schiller. But I also thought tell me a little bit more about this. In the appendix, at least in the version that I have, there is this Broadway video newsletter that is like a comic book. That's the best thing that I could describe it. Like, how did you come across that? What is that?
So that I got from Judy Belushi. She sent that to me, and I asked Tom, "Hey, can I put that in there?" And he's like, "Sure." And I'm like, why not? I mean, this was never going to be a big book. So I figured, if I have stuff like that, let's just put it at the end. People might find it interesting. And it was in the early 80s, there was a newsletter at Broadway Video. Writers would contribute to it. I think Tom kind of took the lead on it. And I remember when I went to Tom Davis's memorial, everyone was there. Aykroyd, Murray, Lorne, Jimmy Fallon, they all gave, they all spoke at this event. And who are the guys who went on to write for the Simpsons? Was it Tom Gamble and
Gene?
It wasn't Al Jean, but it was the guy who has the really hoarse voice. If you listen to Simpsons commentaries, I think it was Gamble. But he was there, and I was chatting with him, and I mentioned the book came up because everyone was wondering why is this 20-something year or 30-something year old guy hanging out at this memorial service where it's just old SNL people. And I explained to him, I wrote this book, and Tom did the foreword years ago. That's how I know him. And they knew about the book because it had those pages in it. I guess they had written some of those, and so they somehow heard about the book because those pages were included. But I think there's like 6 or 7 pages of from those old newsletters, and it's just. Really wacky stuff. A lot of it's very inside. One of them is from when I guess Al Franken and his wife had their first child.
Right.
That's one reason to check out the book. A lot of things I would have done differently if I'd written it today. Maybe I wouldn't have gone into all the minutia or structured it differently, or definitely digged a little deeper into certain things. But that's one of the things I'm really proud of, is just like saying, screw it, let's just put this in. This will be, if it's interesting to just a few people, then it's worth it. Where else are people going to find this? So,
yeah, just really cool artifacts. Another one, just real quickly, I'll mention is the script pages from Don't Look Back in Anger. Like there's an initial version that got completely rewritten, and then the one that and has markings on it and all that. That kind of thing for any SNL historian or nerd is pretty. Yeah,
and that film was initially scripted very differently. It was going to have Tom interviewing, and you can kind of see it all scratched out. And those pages, I think I got from. There's a bunch of the John Belushi stuff I got from Judy, and then a bunch of it I got from Layla Nabulsi, who was a very close friend to John's and who ended up working at SNL and Broadway Video.
Mike, you've brought up a few of the big stars that you interviewed for the book. One name I was curious about, who's a bit enigmatic, particularly since he's passed away. What was it like speaking with Peter Aykroyd? How did you get in contact with him?
So I'd interviewed Dan for the initial paper, the thesis, or whatever you want to call it. And when I wrote the book, I was like, Peter Aykroyd was in one of the great Schiller's Reel shorts, Java Junkie. He also had a bit part in Nothing Lasts Forever. He has kind of a cameo as a musician alongside Judy Belushi, and that happened right after Belushi passed away. And Aykroyd was also Peter Aykroyd was also in a Cinemax comedy experiment, they called it. It was a series of specials that Tom Schiller did called Flapjack Floozy with it was Peter Aykroyd and Terry Garr. So I was like, I'd really like to speak to Peter Aykroyd. Nobody ever talks to him. You don't really read anything about him. He just he did that year on SNL, or part of the year, and then just kind of disappeared. He was involved with some projects with his brother. He did a lot of the music there. I was like, wow, it'd be great to talk to him. And so I reached out to Dan Aykroyd's office, I don't know if you've ever gotten to call Dan Aykroyd's office, but it's like sometimes it has different answering machine messages. But at one point, it was a lady saying, "You've reached, gosh, what was his company? Something Applied Action Research." And then another time, it was "You've reached the office of Elwood Blues." And in any case, I left a message. I was like, "Hey, can I speak to Peter Aykroyd?" And while after that, he called me. He was, I don't want to use the word paranoid. I mean, or speak ill of him in any way, but he was. I think you didn't hear from him much for a reason, maybe. But when I talked to, or at least that's what I'd heard of him about him. But when I talked to him, he was just the greatest guy. He was really sweet. Really remembered a lot of stuff about the movie, about the short films. He had a lot of great info there, and I think I got some cool quotes from him. And that's one of the things I love about the book is where else are you going to hear from Peter Aykroyd about that kind of stuff?
So cool. And I would love for all of our listeners to take the opportunity to go out and get Mike's book that he worked so hard on and now is available in hardcover. Mike, would you mind telling the listeners where they can find the book if they're looking for it?
Yeah, I guess it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. And if you get the new hardcover edition, I'm happy to send. I had these little book plates made, and Tom Schiller signed a whole bunch of them, and I'll sign them too. So if you buy the book and you want it signed by Tom and myself, reach out to me. I guess on Twitter, I'm _Streeter, and I'll just send it to you. But yeah, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, I guess, or the publisher BearManorMedia.com. If you look hard, there might be. So when the book came out, we had a book release party and screening of the film at Lincoln Center. And Bill Murray actually did the book signing with us, which is just the craziest thing. That might be one of the highlights of my life. One of the most bizarre things if you think about it. But yeah, we did a book signing together. So there's a bunch of copies of the previous edition of the book that are signed by Bill Murray, Zach Galligan, the star of Nothing Lasts Forever, and myself and Tom Schiller, obviously, and Tom Davis did the signing as well. But if you can't find one of those, they must be very hard to find. There's not many. Tom and I'll sign it.
I think that's fantastic. And I was just going to say about Bill Murray is like everybody seems to really just who has worked with Tom Schiller has just mad respect and appreciation for his way of writing, his thinking, just his overall philosophy on comedy and even in videography, I guess. But what wouldn't you say Bill Murray, Bill has a certain love for him, and I think his showing up for that release is part of that, is a testament to that.
Yeah, I mean, Bill's always been a big champion of the film. He got the movie. It was because of him that the movie got shown in Brooklyn as part of a retrospective. They did a retrospective of Bill Murray's films in, I guess it was 2004, 2005. And he said, "I'll do it if you can get a print of Nothing Lasts Forever. I'll do it." And so he was there for that. And then he did when the book came out, he did the event there so I've basically watched the movie with him twice, a few seats away from him, which is kind of weird. He's been very, he and Tom have a great connection. It's not that they speak to each other regularly, but he is, he's very fond of Tom as a friend and as an artist as well.
That's awesome. Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. It was so cool to get to hear these stories, and I'm hoping that we can have you back on in the future to get to talk more about your experience writing the book and your interactions with people around the SNL world. So thanks again, Mike. Really appreciate that. And if you are listening to this podcast on the day it comes out, we're heading right towards a monumental episode of Saturday Night Live, which is hosted by Steve Martin and Martin Short. So I would be remiss, Mike, if I didn't ask, are you excited for SNL this week with Steve and Marty?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm getting old, so a lot of the hosts they have, and musical guests especially nowadays, they don't really always, get my interest. I'll watch it, but yeah, Steve Martin, Martin Short, that's got to be that's going to be a great one. Yeah, for sure. I can't wait.
Very excited for that. And of course, you can catch all of our coverage of it starting with the Hot Take Show immediately after the episode airs. We'll be live at 1 a.m. Eastern to break it all down here on our YouTube channel and in our audio feed on Sunday as well, plus our Roundtable by the Numbers and Patron Feedback Show all coming up this week to cover that episode. James, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to get to talk to you.
Absolutely. Likewise.
Yeah, appreciate it. And then SNL in Review, Andy, always a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Andy, also, I know I just want to plug for you as a friend. I love the article you wrote about Adam Sandler. It was great.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, that just came out on Entertainment Weekly, and I should have a couple more pieces coming out by the time this airs, matter of fact. And before we go, I did also want to acknowledge that Mike was able, I don't even know if you remember this, Mike, but you helped facilitate my interview with Tom Schiller during the pandemic. I interviewed him for Vulture, and you were so gracious to put me in contact with him. I got lunch with him out in the Berkshires, like right in the thick of the pandemic. It was like the only fun thing I did for like several weeks.
That's awesome. So definitely check out that interview if you haven't gone back and check it out with Andy and Tom Schiller. So on behalf of James and Andy and Mike Streeter joining us today, my name is Jon Schneider from the Saturday Night Network. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.